Hey, welcome back. Today we're going through May-June 2024, question paper 12. It's the same as always, we'll start at the bottom. Okay, in question 30, table shows components of Japan's current account balance in trillion yen for 2 years. So we're given the 4 components of the current account balance, which are balance of goods, balance of services, balance of primary income, and balance of secondary income. This question should be fairly easy as opposed to other styles of questions that come up for current account balances, because we don't really have to know any components of them, we just have to be able to read the table. So which balance of payments has improved? Has the balance of goods improved? We were minus 1.61 and we are now minus 5.23, so that has got worse. Balance of primary income, we were 14 plus 0.04 positive and we're now still positive, but it's less than it was before, 13.55, so that's also wrong. Balance of secondary income, we were minus 1.11 negative and we are now minus 1.02 positive, or still negative, but we are closer to being positive, so that is the correct answer. And for balance of services, we can see here that our negative amount is increased, so that has not improved, that has also got worse. Okay, table shows the exchange rate of the UK pound to the US dollar. That is the amount of dollars that can be bought with £1. What is the likely effect of the change in the UK economy? So let's have a look at the table first, and we can see that the exchange rate of the UK pound to the US dollar is continually decreasing. So what does that mean? That means that we're experiencing a depreciation, and we know what happens when we have a depreciation is that exports go up and imports go down, because the price of exports become cheaper and the price of imports become more expensive. So will it decrease cost push inflation? No. Remember that cost push inflation is where AS will go to the left, right? So to decrease cost push inflation, we will need to change AS. And exports going up and imports going down will change AD. So what it will result in, it will result in AD moving to the right. Okay. Will it increase a trade deficit? No. Increasing a trade deficit would mean that imports go up and exports go down, because our trade deficit would be getting worse. And we can see here, when we identify its depreciation, that's the opposite effect of what would happen. Therefore, increased quantity of imports, so more imports is also wrong, we'd have less imports, but we would be able to decrease the current account deficit. Now why is that? That's because the current account deficit is relying on imports and exports. So exports would go up, imports would go down, and that would allow us to decrease a current account deficit, or it would allow us to increase a current account surplus. The diagram shows the market for Chinese yuan priced in US dollars. What might have caused the change in demand? So we can see here that demand has moved to the left, very similar to question paper 11. Again, I will direct you to these slides. Very good summary that's provided on foreign exchange rates, and for this, in this case, a decrease in foreign direct investment in China will reduce the demand. So if you think about it this way, if there's less multinational companies coming into China, then there's going to be less demand for yuan to be changed into US dollars, right? There's going to be less yuan exchange on the foreign exchange market. Decrease in levy of tariffs, increase in buying of yuan from central banks. So you can see there, the buying of yuan is obviously going to result in an increase. Increase in China's interest rate will also increase the demand, as people will want to move more into Chinese bank accounts because they get a better return for their savings, and a decrease in the level of tariffs levied by China on imports. That would also increase the demand as we're having more imports brought into the country. Diagram shows the market for an imported good with equilibrium at point X. Country imposes a tariff on this good. What is the new equilibrium point? So first of all, what's a tariff? A tariff is a tax, and it's designed to decrease the number of imports. So when we put a tax on a product, we know what does that do? Well, if we're not dealing with tariffs, we're just dealing with regular demand and supply, we know that an indirect tax, which is what a tariff is, it's going to result in supply moving or shifting to the left, price of the product increasing, and the quantity that is being traded going down. So in this case, from X to B, exact same as the regular demand and regular supply. Once we know it's an indirect tax, it becomes so easy for us to identify where it should move to. If we got rid of a tariff, then we would move or shift back to the right. Okay, a rise in which factor would cause an increase in the population growth of a country? This question is also very easy. A rise in the birth rate would. So what's the two things we're looking for increase in population growth? We're looking for rise in birth rate, or it could be a fall in the death rate, or it could be net immigration, which is more people coming in than going out. So in this case here, net emigration, more people are leaving the country, so that will decrease population growth. If we've got more babies dying, if there's an increase in the infant mortality rate, again that would decrease population growth because we've got less children in the country. And if there's an increase in the death rate, well, that's pretty obvious. If more people are dying, the population of a country is not going to increase. Okay, question 25. Economic development in country X has progressed at a greater rate than country Y. So country X is getting richer than country Y is. What is the most likely explanation of this difference in economic development between country X and country Y? So, country Y has a higher level of spending on healthcare. That's not a reason, because country X is the one that's becoming richer, right? So we'd expect a higher level of spending on healthcare in country X. Country Y has a higher level of investment. That's also incorrect, because again, country Y is the poor country, country X is the rich country, so we'd expect higher level of investment in country X. Country X has a higher level of unemployment. Again, that's not a likely explanation. We'd expect unemployment to be lower in country X than it would be in country Y, because they're developing or they're getting richer quicker. So, country X has a higher level of spending on education than country Y. That would be an explanation of the difference as to why country X is developing quicker than country Y. People are becoming more skilled, getting access to better education. Okay, table shows statistics for 4 countries. We're asked which country has the lowest standard of living. So what we're going to be looking for is we're going to be looking for GDP per head to be low, life expectancy to be low, and average years of schooling to be low also. So if we just look at the table and identify that, GDP per head is $200 here, and it's $200 in this country also. But oh, forgive my blue pen going off randomly there. Average years of schooling is 6, but the life expectancy is only 45 in country A. So country A we would expect to have the lowest living standing, because people go to school for the least amount of time, so they get the least or the smallest level of education. They die earlier than they do in other countries, and they've got the same GDP or less than other countries also. Okay, what is least likely to be included in the Consumer Price Index? So remember, the Consumer Price Index is a basket of goods and services. So what we're looking for is what wouldn't be included. Personal mobile phones would, because they're something that people buy all the time. Milk would, because again it's a product that is bought and sold. Same with domestic cooking oil. We buy domestic cooking oil, we sell domestic cooking oil, but for homemade clothes, people would be making clothes themselves, similar to the theory we have behind subsistence farming also. It's difficult to include it if somebody is making it in their own house and just wearing it themselves, because it wouldn't be bought, it wouldn't be sold, so we've no way of determining or identifying if the price of them have increased or decreased. Okay, 22. How is the pattern of employment likely to change when a country becomes more developed? So a country is becoming more skilled or richer. What's going to happen? Will we move from tertiary to secondary? Possibly, but unlikely. From technical to manual, from skilled to primary. So from skilled to primary, definitely not. Right? Why? Because what normally happens is we move away from the primary sector into the secondary and the tertiary sector as we become more developed. So we might move from manual to technical employment, but we definitely won't move from technical to manual. That would be if we're becoming less developed, because what that would do is it would decrease our productivity, which would stop us from becoming more developed. But we would have people moving from rural areas into urban areas, and we've actually seen a lot of this happening in China as well, so you can think about China for this. People have moved from rural areas into Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, all these different urban areas where employment is easier to obtain and where you can get a better job. And that's what happens as a country develops. Okay, 21. What change is most likely to cause faster economic growth in the short run? Okay, so we need to remember, what's economic growth? Economic growth is where our real GDP will increase. So it would be an increase in output. Right? Now, which one of these is going to help us to increase our output? If we have an increase in the number of people who are leaving the country, hence emigration here, that's not going to help us to produce more. If we have an increase in the birth rate, in the future that may help us to produce more, but it's going to be about 20 years before those people can work. So it will not affect it in the short run, which is the question. And if we've more people dying, well, that's pretty obvious. That's definitely not going to help us to increase our output. However, if we have an increase in the retirement age, people will be working for longer, so we may be able to increase our output over that short period of time, where we're going to have people working for an extra year or an extra 2 years, etc. Okay, what statement about supply side policy is correct? It aims to increase the productive potential. Like I said, what does supply side do? We should know this. Nobody should really be getting this question wrong. AS goes to the right, and it increases the potential that we have to increase our economic growth, right? It does not affect demand. That would be fiscal and monetary policy. It does not involve the foreign exchange rate, and it does not involve the rate of interest. That's monetary policy, and that would affect AD. So all the other ones would affect AD here. Depreciations or appreciations of foreign exchange rates will affect AD also. But supply side policies, education and training, deregulation, privatization, improved spending on education, improved spending on infrastructure, etc. increasing the productive potential, allowing us to grow more in the future. Okay, question 19. The diagram shows the impact of a tax on a product. What area represents the amount of tax paid by the consumers? Okay, so we start here, right? And we're moving to a new equilibrium of E. Now, one thing that I'll just put in here, you can look over these. I've got diagrams exactly like this in my slides and in the Save My Exam notes. Depending on the elasticity, they can either pass on more or less of the tax to the consumer. But if I just put in here briefly, this is how it would look. So we can see that the tax that would be paid to the consumer, P1, P2, EF, right, this area. And this is about as easy of the diagrams they can give you, where they're not asking about elasticity effects, etc. The producer burden for the tax would be down below here. So this is essentially what the producer is losing, and this is the extra money that the consumer has to pay because of the tax. And like I said, the amount they can pass on depends on the elasticity. So if it is highly inelastic, for example, like this, then the amount of tax that would be passed on would be much different. Okay, you can look over them. All these diagrams for indirect taxes, the effect or the burden of taxes, and also the gain from a subsidy, they're all given in Unit 2. Okay, so go take a look at those revision notes and just have a look over and contact me if you have any more questions on these ones. They're not a very common question that arises, but they do pop up from time to time. Okay, a government wishes to prevent deflation. What combinations of policies would be most effective in achieving this aim? So, deflation, we're going to assume here, or I will assume anyway for the start, that we're looking at bad deflation. And bad deflation is where AD goes left. So how do we fix that? We need to move AD to the right. So what can we use? Well, we can either use expansionary fiscal policy or expansionary monetary policy. Fiscal policy, taxes and government spending. Monetary policy, interest rates, credit regulations, exchange rates, money supply. I just write MS and then exchange rate. Okay, so what happens? Expansionary fiscal is we reduce the level of taxes and we increase the government spending. For expansionary monetary policy, we decrease the interest rates, we decrease the credit regulations, we increase the money supply, and we decrease the exchange rate. So once we know the directions of these, we can figure out which one it should be. So government spending, we know that that should increase because we've just given it here from fiscal policy. And interest rate, we know, should go down. So what we're left here with is the correct answer of C. Reducing the interest rate will make it easier for people to borrow money, which means that they will spend more money. So AD will move to the right. Consumer expenditure and investment will increase, and then government spending is another component of AD. C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Government spending increases, AD moves to the right also. So it might help us to fix our deflation. Okay, what is not a role of a central government in a mixed economy? So, in this case, what do? Do they have to provide merits? Yes. Because they're underconsumed, they may not be provided. They definitely have to provide public goods because private sector won't provide them. And they have an aim of price stability, so they want to keep inflation at a manageable rate. So they are all things that they will try and do, but they won't provide demerit goods. And why not? Because the government's aim is to increase the standard of living for people in their country, and providing demerit goods will decrease that standard of living because we know that they're harmful for people to consume. Okay, what are the features of a highly competitive market when compared with a monopoly market? So we're looking at two factors, price and profit. Now, what do we know about a competitive market? We know that they're going to have a lot of different suppliers or sellers, and when we have a lot of different suppliers, that means that the price of the products will be lower, because if somebody charges a high price, the consumers have the option of switching to a competitor. When it comes to profit, because their prices they're charging are lower, the profit would also have to be lower, because they're going to be dealing with smaller margins. In a monopoly market, profit would be higher and price would be higher. So A would be a perfect example of a monopoly market. Price would be high because they've got no competitors, and the profit would be high because they are the only business in it. So they're essentially taking all of the customers. In a competitive market, you've got to fight for your customers. So your profit will likely to be lower because you've got a smaller percentage of the market. Okay, question 15, again, I've gone through this in previous ones. You just have to go learn your functions and characteristics of money. In this case, the function of money that acts as a measure of value would be a unit of account. Okay, just go and learn them, all available, unit 3. Okay, the table shows the daily average revenue and the units of output sold for a firm producing bicycles over a 5-day period. What can be concluded from the table? So, the firm's highest total revenue occurs at 2 units of output sold. So let's check that. 2 multiplied by 200 is going to give us 400. So that's their total revenue there. 4 multiplied by 160 is 640. So straight away we know that's wrong, right? Because when they have 2 units of output, 2 units of output they're saying is the highest. So 8 multiplied by 120 is 960. So now we can see that it's wrong, because when there are 3 units of output, their revenue is higher. The firm's total revenue always increases as output rises. So let's test this out. So far we're following that. 400, 640, 960. 80 multiplied by 14. What would that give us? That would give us 1,120. And 40 multiplied by 16. That would give us 640. So we can see they were nearly there, but the firm's total revenue doesn't always increase as output rises, because it goes down between 4 and 5 units of, or 14 and 16 units of output sold. And the firm's prices are always greater than total revenue. Well, that's also obviously wrong. We're not told what their prices are, so we can't conclude that from the table. However, we can see that the highest total revenue occurs at 14 units of output sold. So B would be the correct answer here. Okay, what's a variable cost for a firm? So we should know our difference between variable costs and fixed costs. Fixed costs are things like rent, etc. Variable costs are things that come into what changes on a month-to-month basis. So in this case, the interest rate that they're paying on existing loans, that will be a fixed cost because it's going to be set for a period of a year or 2 years, or however long the loan is. The rent we've already described there will be a fixed cost. They pay the same amount every month, and they're also going to pay the same amount on the insurance of the factory buildings over a year and probably renewed on a yearly basis. However, the cost of raw materials, they will change from month to month, depending on the conditions of demand and supply for those raw materials themselves. So raw materials are a variable cost. Rent, interest payment on loans, insurance on factory buildings are all fixed costs. Okay, what combination shows the advantages of a small firm over a larger firm? So is there better communication? Well, in a small firm there would be better communication. Why? Because they don't have to go through so many people or through so many different layers, right? So it's easier to communicate with the staff. Would there be a greater level of independence? Yes, there would. Large firm might be restricted by a parent company, etc. They might have a number of different subsidiaries that maybe don't have as much independence as they would like. So in this case, would there be a lower average cost? No. As we get bigger, what do we know happens? We know that we get to experience, if we're lucky, economies of scale. So I'll put EOC here for them. And that's as a firm grows, which a larger firm would, more than a smaller firm, their average cost of production comes down. So we would have better communication, we would have greater independence, but we would not have a lower average cost. A larger firm would have a lower average cost than a smaller firm. So C would be our answer here. Okay, what would cause a decrease in spending by households in a country? So would it be lower savings? No. Would it be lower interest rates? No. Lower interest rates would increase the spending by households. Lower savings may possibly decrease the spending, but it's unlikely. They're probably taking out their savings to spend, and also it's possible that they're just moving their savings from one area to another, but they're still spending the same amount of money. If we reduce the rate of sales tax, that's going to incentivize people to buy more goods and services for whatever product was taxed, so that would also increase the spending. But if people have less disposable income, so if they have less money on a month-to-month basis left after they pay their bills, so if they pay their rent, their electricity bill, their gas bill, they give money for whatever loans they have, etc., well then that's definitely going to decrease their spending if they've got less money available in their pocket. Okay, question 10. Quite an unusual question, a good question though. Diagram shows the wage rate of cleaners and nurses. What is the result if a national minimum wage of OM is introduced? So we're looking at cleaners and we're looking at nurses, and we can see here that the equilibrium for cleaners is below what the minimum wage is being proposed at. But for nurses, the minimum wage is actually below the current equilibrium, so the current level or average that people are being paid. Therefore, what would happen here? The wage rate of cleaners, we can see, would go up, yeah, because the minimum wage is above the current equilibrium. And now we have to decide for nurses what would happen. So would there be a fall or would there be no change? Now, even if you couldn't understand the theory behind this, you should be able to identify, well, it's definitely not going to go down, because just because the minimum wage is introduced below the current equilibrium, if they do introduce the minimum wage, they're going to have a shortage, right? They're going to have too much demand for nurses but not enough nurses wanting to work. So they're obviously not going to do that. It's going to stay at its current level. So why? If they do introduce that minimum wage, it would create the shortage, and then prices would be pushed back up until we reach equilibrium anyway. So what's going to happen is that the wage rate of nurses won't change, the minimum wage won't have an effect on the nursing industry, but it will have a positive effect for anybody that's a cleaner, as they will now be able to get a higher level of income. Okay, which government measure is likely to cause a fall in both price and quantity traded? So, would it be indirect tax, minimum price, maximum price, or subsidies? The first thing we need to do is we need to know what would happen with these, or what would happen with each one. So in this case, if we have an indirect tax, what do we know would happen? Well, we know that supply would go left, right? If we have a subsidy, supply would go right. If we have a maximum price, we would have a shortage, and if we have a minimum price, we would have excess supply. Okay, so when we have an indirect tax, the quantity traded will go down, but the price will go up, and you can draw a demand and supply curve to show that. When we have a subsidy, the price would go down, but the quantity traded would go up, and you can see that by shifting supply to the right. When we have a minimum price, so the price has to go above the equilibrium level, so a minimum price would be put in around here, therefore the price is going to go up, but the quantity traded will come down, right, because we're going to create a gap. But maximum pricing goes down here. We would have a price below equilibrium, so price would come down, it would fall, and the quantity traded would fall as well, because we're creating a shortage here. So B is our correct answer in this case. Draw your diagrams to show you the answers for those. If you need any clarification on those diagrams, you can find them all in Unit 2. If you still need clarification, just contact me on it. Okay, question 8. In response to an increase in price from $5 per kilo to $6 per kilo, a farmer increased supply from 400 kg to 500 kg. What is the price elasticity of supply? So if we remember our formula, it's the percentage change in quantity supplied over the percentage change in price. So let's calculate that. 500 minus 400 divided by 400, that will give us a 25% change in QS, in quantity supplied. The price change will be 6 minus 5 divided by 5, which will give us a 20% change. So, formula put in correctly, would be 25% divided by 20%, so our PES should be 1.25. So correct answer will be D. Okay. Okay, question 7. What statement describes a market in disequilibrium? So remember, disequilibrium in very simple terms, it just means that demand does not equal supply. Okay? So in this case, the quantity demanded by consumers equals the supply. That's wrong. That would be, or that would describe a market in equilibrium. Okay, equilibrium, demand equals supply. Disequilibrium, demand doesn't equal supply. Price changes cause further changes in both demand and supply. That does not describe equilibrium also, because it's possible that demand and supply will just move together, but we will still be at a point of equilibrium. Point where demand and supply serves cross, that's the same as D here. So that's just essentially saying that we're in equilibrium, because the point at where they cross would mean that demand equals supply. But if we have excess demand, then that would be disequilibrium. The same way that if we have excess supply, that would also be disequilibrium, because we have more demand than supply, and if we have excess supply, we have more supply than demand. So we're not in the equilibrium point. Okay, question 6. Supermarkets sell petrol, gas outside their stores. They reduce the price of petrol below other suppliers to attract more customers to buy goods in the store when they buy petrol. If they were successful on demand, how would it be shown on demand and supply diagrams? Okay, so the demand and supply diagram for petrol, what's happened? They've reduced the price of petrol below other suppliers to attract more customers to buy goods. So what's going to happen there is that they're going to have a shift of the supply curve to the right. And then we have another option for supply curve to the right, no. And then the demand curve for the store's goods would shift to the right also, because they're going to be complements, right? So if they're selling petrol, they reduce the price, they'd have to shift supply to the right, because in order for that to happen, that results in the price going down. The only other way of getting the price to go down would be demand going to the left, and demand is something that they can't control. Demand is something that is controlled by the consumers themselves. So once they increase or reduce the price of petrol, more people will be coming to their area to buy petrol, and they're likely, because they're complements, to go into the store and to buy more of their goods. So the demand curve would also shift to the right. Okay, what is likely to cause an extension in demand for a firm's fruit drink? So we can see by the options here that we're talking about it'll be a shift that will cause an extension in demand. So if we're going to have an extension in demand, we know that it's got to be the quantity going up, which means that we're looking for a reason why supply would shift to the right. Okay, so we start here and we end here. This would show the extension in demand as we move down along the demand curve. So would a successful advertising campaign by the firm? No, because what that would do is that would shift demand. It would not cause an extension in demand, and it would shift demand to the right. So we'd end up here somewhere. A rival firm leaving the market? No, that would shift supply to the left, which would cause a contraction in demand, as you can see here from the marker, because demand would move up the curve. When demand moves down, that's the extension, and when it moves up, that's the contraction. Would it would it be a reduction in the cost of producing the drink? Yes, it would, because what that would do is that would shift the supply curve to the left. So therefore, to the right, sorry, that would extend demand and it would increase the quantity that's traded. And a period of hot weather would result in the demand for the hot drinks shifting to the right, not an extension, not a contraction. Okay, question 4. What is not a macroeconomic topic? So basically they're asking us what's micro. GDP is macro, CPI is macro, level of unemployment is macro. Microeconomic topics are the study of the behavior of individuals, firms, or individual markets. So in this case, the German car industry, that's an individual market. It's not affecting everybody, hence the reason why it's not macro. Unemployment would affect everybody, CPI would too, and so would GDP. Okay, diagram shows a country's production possibility curve. What current combination of capital and consumer goods would produce the greatest number of consumer goods in the future? Okay, so let's see where we're at. Now remember that they're saying what would produce the greatest number of consumer goods in the future. This is actually quite a difficult question. Okay, so if we look at the options that we have, O and Q, that means that we be producing right here, yeah? And if we have O and Q, that means that we would be producing the greatest number of consumer goods right now. But in the future, so we'd increase our living standards dramatically at the current time, but it would not allow us to increase our number of consumer goods in the future. Why? We need to allocate more resources to capital goods to allow us to expand our production capabilities, because that's what capital goods are concerned with. Capital goods are concerned or help us to grow in the future. Consumer goods are concerned with or help with living standards. So therefore, in this case, if we produce at P and O, we would move all of our production to capital goods, which means that we'd be producing no consumer goods right now, but in the future it would allow us to shift our PPC and to be able to produce more consumer goods as a maximum, which I'll call this point Z, in the future than we can right now. Or an S, U and V, they would just be reallocating resources. So quite a difficult question, because it expects you to understand capital goods are what will increase our productive capabilities in the future. But a good question. Okay, a student decides to take up a 2-year apprenticeship in which she will earn 10k per year. After that, she expects to earn 25k per year. She could take an unskilled job which pays 16,000 per year instead of the apprenticeship. What is the opportunity cost in 2 years? So don't forget that you see 2 years here of completing the apprenticeship. Okay, opportunity cost is what she's giving up. So in this case, what is she giving up? Well, she's giving up 16,000 per year, right? So she's giving up 16,000 multiplied by 2, she's giving up $32,000 per year. But if she completes the apprenticeship, she's getting paid 10k per year. So what she's going to earn over that period of time is 20,000 per year. So 32,000 minus 20,000 leaves us with an opportunity cost of 12,000 over the course of the 2 years. Now this part was thrown in to try and throw you off. After that, she expects to earn 25 per year. We don't account for that in our calculation because we're only told what is the opportunity cost for the 2 years of completing the apprenticeship. We're not asked about the opportunity cost of 3 years or 4 years when she will start to earn this 25,000. Okay, and finally, why will scarcity always exist? Scarcity will always exist because they're unlimited wants. So like I said to you on numerous occasions before, what is our definition of scarcity or the basic economic problem? I just put keywords up here: limited resources, unlimited wants, scarcity, choices, opportunity cost. Okay, every time we do this, this is what I've put in class on the slides and in the revision notes for you guys, and on the Microsoft whiteboard diagrams also. These are the 5 key terms with scarcity or basic economic problem, and if we just know those, we'll be able to answer all of those questions that come up for the first one in the multiple choice papers. Okay, thanks for listening.